Thank you, friends, for reading that. So I'll pass it over to Dr. Javaheri if you want to take a moment to walk through the letter paragraph by paragraph, and then we can open it up.
Okay. I'm trying to get the faces on the screen. That is where I get my inspiration.
Okay, I'll stop sharing, and then you'll be able to see everyone. Okay.
Okay, I see. Okay, I see.
Now you should be able to see everyone now, or at least
yes. Now I can see everyone. Yes, I can by moving by space. So, friends, it's certainly a joy to share a few personal thoughts on this mighty plan of message of the Universal House of Justice. I will try to not take more than 25-30 minutes, as hard as that is, so that if there is opportunity for others to comment or raising questions, then depending on Jeff, whether you said there will be time or not. But friends, I think my first thought is that in the span of 50 days, we have received 3 messages of the Universal House of Justice. That by itself tells us that we live in very, very special days. And as the House of Justice in the first paragraph says, they say there is such exceptional circumstances. We are entering the last year of the plan, that we have to address these letter to the National Spiritual Assemblies, as we have seen at the end why that was the case. The House of Justice praises the fact that the Baha'i community has remained composed, has remained focused. In fact, probably we will all agree that it has become even more active. If I judge by our own cluster and by Canada, certainly the Baha'i community has responded beautifully. The House of Justice calls it a fitting response to an emergency situation. So this is a sign of strength, friends, of the Baha'i community. In the Rezvan message, yes, the House of Justice, you remember, they talked about the faith reaching a point of strength unparalleled in its history. And you may wonder why. What was the standards used to measure? Well, think about any standards that you want to measure, but certainly the fact that you face this global crisis and you spring on your feet and begin to actually do what you have to do is certainly one of the signs of strength. We may ask ourselves, what are the other emergency situations in relation to the society at large, when in the past Baha'i community could contribute and make a difference in the past? In my understanding, while there have been cases that Baha'i communities at different national levels had to face emergency situations, whether it was a war in an African country or a flood or a tornado in Vanuatu and stuff, I don't think the present Baha'i generation remembers a global crisis of this magnitude. Yes, we probably could say there was the Spanish flu in, I don't know whether 1915 or 1917. There was the World War I and World War II, but the Baha'i community at that time did not have the capacity, whether at the level of individuals or at the level of institutions, to make a difference. So it's very important for us to realize how significant is this opportunity, for us to realize that the more we grow, the more we experience, the more we are in the life of society, the more we have the responsibility and the more humanity will be counting on us to contribute to face that crisis. So that our first experience in the existing memory, the House of Justice says it's a fitting response to an emergency situation, is a very is a wonderful testimony. I suppose I just go paragraph by paragraph and I finish my comments and then we invite. Is that the case? Okay. So you'll have to excuse me if I am talking for a long time. I didn't mean that. But in paragraph 2, the House of Justice basically is saying that in 2015, when we asked for the 5,000 programs of growth to be established worldwide, we were aware that this was these are the words of the House of Justice, but faced with the plight of a world that suffers more each day bereft of Baha'u'llah's elixir, we cannot in conscience ask anything less of his beloved followers. In other words, due to the plight of humanity, we couldn't ask. But so we could also ask ourselves, what is the relationship between the plight of humanity and our activities? Why should the two be related? I'm tempted to want to hear your views now, but I don't know if we open it to discussion, it may take longer. So I'm sorry if I keep wanting to have a discussion rather than my talking. But you know, when I asked this question of myself, I thought, well, this coronavirus pandemic has demonstrated to us how communities and governments that appear to be in very strong positions are not prepared to do what they have to do at the time of need. Not enough ventilators, not enough beds in the hospitals, very basics, not even enough masks for their staff. So, and I think that when the day comes when finally humanity will wake up and it will require direct assistance from the Baha'i community to help them understand the message of Baha'u'llah, I don't think it will be in the middle of a very joyful and happy ceremony. I don't think people will be going on holiday and they will be swimming in the beach. There will be difficulties. There will be tests. There will be emergency situations. In that emergency situation, we cannot be running out of ventilators. We have to have enough children classes. We have to have enough junior youth. We have to, all what we are preparing are what humanity needs. And we have to be able to have enough of them. But we also, more than that, have to have the capacity to get together the three protagonists and come up and show our ability to be able to respond to the needs. So to me, this is how the plight of humanity and the level of activities of the Baha'i community are related. As the plight of humanity is getting worse, we need to be able to do more. Sometimes I also think another analogy comes to my mind is that, you know, for an aeroplane to take off, friends, the engines must be able to produce power more and larger than the power of gravity. Otherwise, the aeroplane cannot take off. it's not our activities by statistic that matters, but it is the spiritual energy, that the intensity of our activities and the level of sacrifices that we make, that spiritual energy must be bigger and larger than the power of materialism that is pulling humanity down. So we need to, the two are related, the two are connected, and therefore the emphasis of the House of Justice on the intensity of the conversation in every cluster, on an increase in the number of devotional meetings, on an increase on the number of children class and junior youth and study circles, is for that purpose, to make us prepared to be able to respond to the needs of a humanity that is increasingly struggling with the lack of spirituality. But then the House of Justice, in the same paragraph, they talk about how in the past 4 years, we have, the Baha'i community has doubled what had been achieved in the past, in 20 years before. So imagine that between let's say 2001 and 2015, whatever number of core activities we had, between 2015 and 2019, we have doubled it. That is the level of strength of the Baha'i community. And I have the world statistics. I collected it for the sake of my own understanding, just to give you an idea. In October 2015, roughly the world had only 93,000 core activities. And in April 2020, in October 2019, 4 years later, it was 217,000. So in fact, it's more than double. The same is true for participations. It came from 685,000 to 1.5 million. So you can think about this in your country. If you take Canada, Canada has done very well. It's one of the countries that is contributing to this process. And you can also think of your clusters, how well your clusters have done. It is this intensity of constant intensity of our activities that are required if we want to make a difference in our cluster. So what we have achieved, the House of Justice says, is a sign of strength of our community. And the House of Justice is expressing its joy at the number of communities that are able to now adopt, now that the situation has changed tremendously. This agility, this power of adaptability, the House of Justice is praising it. And they are saying basically, giving us few very important advice here. One of the things that the Baha'i, our strength demonstrate, is that we did not take it as a vacation. We did not take it as a hiatus. We didn't say, oh, thank God, now let me go for a holiday, now that I cannot do my core activities. In fact, friends, I don't know whether you will agree with me. I think the way the few cities, at least in Canada, I have watched, as if people are looking at it as a hiatus, and they are just tired of sitting at home. And now that it's opening up, they, at least in some cases, they go for it, and in a very unreasonable way, ignoring what needs to be done for their own health and for the health of the public. So we as Baha'is have jumped on and sprang on our feet and realized, all right, we have to adopt. We have to make sure that we will make best use of the situation. And of course, you have read the messages of the House of Justice, Nowruz and Rizwan. The messages and our responsibilities began by saying, take care of the needy, give priority to the one that is more at need. And so common sense, you have to participate fully in aiding others to face this calamity. But the House of Justice says, don't make a mistake. It is also time for serious activities, serious thoughts. And in fact, the state of the world needs more and more to render meaningful services. And it's even more urgent. So the key to me is to be able to see our taking care of the needs, taking care of the elderly, whatever we do for the physical aspect of this pandemic, and whatever we do for our core activities to really increase this meaningful conversation among the people, we see it as a seamless continuum of the same. Service to humanity. It's just that what we do has to make sense for the circumstances. Therefore, you attend to the physical needs first, but don't forget that this is also the right time to look for opportunities of developing friendships and have meaningful conversation about the future of activities. In talking about our activities, it's very interesting that they say, on one hand, flexibility is very important, but on the other hand, they say also we have to watch that our activities remain focused on our localities. So you see, look at our tonight gathering. It's very exciting to be able to talk to the whole, basically from several continents. But if we go and use the technology this way, we may lose the focus of the fact that this needs to result in intensity of the conversation in our clusters. So we need to adapt for the use of technology, but do not lose the sight of the fact that we need to adapt to this technology for an intensity of our activities at the cluster level, and even in our neighborhood levels. They talk about new possibilities that has emerged as a result of this. Not only we can do what we were doing before, but there are new possibilities. I don't know about your areas, but we have the number of people attending feasts has increased. The number of people who are as if they were marginalized, they had, I don't know, different responsibilities, different way of life, were not allowed, they were not in a position to attend to the core activities or the feast. Now they can do it. And so the people who were not so interested in socializing, if you like, now there is more time at hand, and they are. So the possibilities for what we want to do is interesting that it has increased very, very much. But at the same time, the House of Justice is giving guidance to the National Assemblies. If some activities need to be postponed, don't worry. There is you'll review it later. There will be a 1-year plan and so forth. And then in paragraph 5, they talk about all this is clear, but you may face into a challenge of not having enough access to adequate financial resources. You may ask yourself why. Why would that be the case? I think there is more than one reason, in my opinion. Again, as I said, I would have definitely would have been better if we were able to exchange views at this stage. But with the large numbers not being able to do that, I sometimes think that things may get more expensive. Friends who are facing financial difficulties may not be able to contribute the same level as before. Things may not be able, even if you have the money, you may not be able to buy everything that you need. But the House of Justice is saying, let us be absolutely clear and no ambiguity. The work should not stop because of lack of funds. The House of Justice is ready to assist, but it's also beautiful. They express their confidence that the body of the believers will arise, and particularly those with means will come to your aid. And when I read this, friends, I thought, how interesting, because those with means, they also have some good sense of business to think about. One time I remember when we were still in Haifa, a friend who was quite advanced in age, but very well off in terms of finances, was passing through Haifa and wanted to see me. As we were talking, it was the time when the House of Justice had announced the 95 youth conferences. So he said, when I received this copy of this letter from my National Assembly and I read it, my understanding from that letter was that it was the House of Justice that had decided how many youth conferences should happen in that country where he resided. So he said, I called the National Assembly and I said, this is my understanding. Is that correct? Is my understanding correct? The National Assembly said, yes, it's correct. So he said, you see, this is now where the sense of business comes in. He says, so if you have not planned for it, do you have the budget for it? And the National Assembly said, no, I don't. No, we don't. Not yet. And he said, okay. I put the receiver down and I sent them a big fat check. So the concept that because each one of us may have a mentality for normal conditions of this is the amount I'm sending every month, this is how I would send it, and so on. But I think we need to also re-examine. For instance, the same way that there are individuals of means, and the same way that there are individuals who will have financial difficulties, there would also be countries where they will not be able to meet all their requirements through their Baha'i community, which means that the Universal House of Justice will have to support many national communities, which means that they should worry about also the international fund. So there is a lot in this paragraph, but also it's a beautiful sign of strength of the Baha'i community, the way the House of Justice has chosen to speak, because they are confident that this will not be a problem. Paragraph 6, it has two for me, two sections, but generally as if the House of Justice is trying to ensure that each community will be able to read its reality properly. One is talking about, first they are talking about the areas that are already affected, and by saying that the challenges are different and these challenges will change. But in any case, it requires the agility of the local, regional, and national institutions. And I think each institution, and I would say particularly the local spiritual assemblies, because national assemblies are used to this. but local assemblies should now also try to read their reality well and see what is it that the friends need. What should they do? What do they see is going to happen in the next 6 months to 12 months? The House of Justice emphasizes that you should consult with the councillors. Well, I think at the level of local assemblies, there should also be a consultation with the auxiliary board members. And they talk about this consultation to be a constant exchange of informations, to be able to see the possibilities that exist and the situation predicted before it can happen. So this is an exercise that not necessarily many of our local institutions are used to it, and it's wonderful to really attend to it with the aim of seizing the opportunities for service. And then they refer to the countries or the regions or the cities where the situation may get worse. And they advise to prepare for it before limitations does not allow you to prepare. To the local spiritual assemblies, it says, where is it? The local assemblies should consider what means might be within their power to prevent, relieve, or mitigate suffering in the wider society. And this is quite a responsibility. And to me, this implies that the local assemblies should actually get to know their areas of jurisdiction well. If you remember, in 2010, letter of the House of Justice, 28 December 2010, addressed to the Continental Board of Councillors, talking about the plan and talking about what should the local assemblies be doing, the House of Justice said, 1, 2, 3. They talked about, they were comparing between the responsibilities of the local assemblies in villages and in the municipalities, larger municipalities, metropolitan areas. They said these in the municipal areas, in the metropolitan areas, the institutional structures in an urban area, then they say social, political, and cultural, with which the assembly, the local assembly, must learn to engage, are wider. So to me, this sentence does not mean what does the local assembly have. Yes, what you have, your community, you're resourceful of the Baha'is and so on, it's what the community has. But maybe the possibilities exist for cooperating with other organizations in the cluster through the local assemblies. So it requires a very thorough examination of the situation, predicting what can come, and consulting the believers and others as what are the possibilities for us to make a difference, for us to engage with this larger society in tackling this pandemic. Okay, and then in paragraph 7, friends, the House of Justice is saying that when society is facing difficulties, the concept of service speaks louder. In other words, it becomes to focus. And they are saying you may have different lines of action, but this is now the time to realize that it will all surge into one, converge into, it becomes a service to that community. And if we have to, my understanding is that it says if we have to modify some of the activities, by all means, we should do it. but we should also demonstrate, as we have done so far most beautifully, the relationship that exists between the three protagonists of the plan, demonstrated to the world how the three protagonists cooperate with each other, how their relationship is characterized by love and obedience and cooperation, so that we are noticed by the larger society. The community building power, or the civilization building power of the cause of God, is demonstrated to the larger society. This is an opportunity. And then what I think is very important in this paragraph, they say, do this because there is another area of service that also needs to be responded to, and that is discourses of society. Friends, it is interesting to see how this pandemic has brought up, exposed, if you like, almost all the core principles of the faith that is needed. It has been brought to the attention. The humanity has to talk about it. In every message of the House of Justice, we have heard that they say, never before the sense for unity has been so strong. You must be listening to news of various kind and see how this comes in different shape. I don't know if you noted and read the Guardian newspaper from the UK on the 23rd of April. I have that written because I thought it was one of the most outstanding statements about unity. The Guardian newspaper, very prominent newspaper. It says, let me see. It says the heading of the newspaper read, COVID-19 proves it. Unity is the only remedy for 21st century global crisis. And in the conclusion of that article, it says the problem of this century will be global, and they will be intimate. Our culture of division cannot stand. In the 21st century, it is solidarity or death. You couldn't go stronger than this. And so this brings now opportunities for the Baha'is to be present where these issues are discussed, because we will be able to contribute clarity to a level that nobody else probably could. All of a sudden, humanity has woken up and realized that the solving of the climate issues is related directly to our way of life. So if I want to solve the climate change, if humanity wants it, it will have to examine its way of life. Never before this we could speak so clearly about it. Even more profoundly than this, how many times have we heard to say, put a mask on? Even though it doesn't help you, you put a mask on to help others, and others will put a mask on to help you. So this simple principle is what Baha'u'llah gave to the rulers of the world 150 years ago, by saying that to govern humanity, you have to consider humanity like a body of an individual human beings. The cells, in order to be happy, they should not think of their own happiness, they should think of the health of the body. And when the entire body is healthy, every cell will be happy. Well, you couldn't tell me how far humanity was from this before this pandemic, because self-interest was the driving force. I am not, I don't want to say I'm not naive, but I don't have a lot of hope that the humanity will overcome this problem. But I think it's easier now to bring to their attention that some of our problems will only be solved if we are able to give preference to the common good than to ourselves. So these are the issues, and more of these, that we need to be present at spaces where these discourses are taking place. And the House of Justice in this paragraph says this is also a service that needs to be attended to. And so I don't know how many of our local spiritual assemblies and how many of our clusters have been following this idea that what are the spaces in our clusters where we could contribute to some of these discourses, because the presence of the faith, the existence of the faith, the activities of the Baha'i community should also be known more widely in every cluster, and this is an opportunity. Anyway, there is a lot more can be said on this. When you think about what the impact that the World War I and World War II had on the faith, and as horrible as the result of these World War were, they resulted in a shift in the direction humanity began to look for the governance of the global affairs. And Shoghi Effendi refers to this and calls it prerequisite for the unification of mankind. In other words, the World War II had such an impact on humanity that is considered a turning point in the way the concept of one world, one country, one global came into the consciousness of humanity. These current crisis, friends, will have major impact on humanity. You remember in the first message of Nowruz, the House of Justice said humanity will come out of this finally with a higher awareness of its unity and interdependency. And whereas in the past, in spite of this impact, humanity could not reach its goal because of its weaknesses that couldn't overcome, as the House of Justice says in its message of 2019. Now we are in a position to contribute to the discourses, not allowing humanity to miss again the opportunity because of its weaknesses. And its weaknesses: self-interest, materialism, lack of balance between spirituality and materialism, and so on and so on. And the House of Justice is saying contributing to the discourses of society is another area of service that needs attention. Okay, I think we are coming to an end. Good news. In paragraph 8, do you remember or do you agree with me that every major message of the House of Justice, when we talk about the plan, the global plan, House of Justice takes an opportunity to remind us that what we are engaged in is a spiritual enterprise. Friends, otherwise, sometimes I think that if we are not fully aware of that, we could look like a very nice, spiritually minded NGO that are engaged in certain activities. And God forbid that we would be like that. We are protagonists in the cause of God. We are, by our faith by our sincerity, by our sacrifices, by our obedience to the head of our faith. We are following a plan which is divine in origin. We are guided by an institution that is divine in origin. It is guided by Baha'u'llah himself. And our aim is to, through our sincere efforts, to facilitate the release of spiritual energies that will then sort out the problems of the world. We are not solving the problems of the world, so to speak. We are privileged to be an instrument for the release of these spiritual energies. Our 5-year plans are not a project made of a certain goals to shape up the Baha'i community in a certain way. Our plans are the response of the Universal House of Justice to these spiritual forces. So the House of Justice is really, once again, is taking this opportunity to remind us. And we know in the writings how the level of sincerity, faith, and sacrifice is directly related to the amount of spiritual energy that is being released. So we are invited to really reflect and ponder on this aspect of our work. And the paragraph 9 is that beautiful paragraph that says we don't know how long this will take, but the time could not be, friends, more critical than this. The last year of the plan, of the last plan of this, of the last quarter of the first century of the formative age. By Rizwan 2021, we will begin a new series of plans, which will all be based on what we have achieved so far. So it could not be more critical. It could not be more potent, spiritually potent. So to me, I think that the end of the first century of the formative age, referring to the first century of the formative age, the beloved guardian talks about the implications of the content of the will and testament of Abdul Baha, requiring the passage of 100 years time, which is 2021, and the guidance of the House of Justice. So it is quite a historical time when we will have to be thinking as Baha'i community of the implications of the contents of the will and testament. It is the 100th anniversary of the passing of Abdul Baha. The Universal House of Justice has added to this potency by adding the construction of the Shrine of Abdul Baha. So sources of spiritual energies to be released are in abundance. And the House of Justice is trying to tell us this is not a usual time. This is the time of history making. And with Baha'u'llah being our supporter and our assistance, the House of Justice says that's why we have absolute confidence that you will arise and do your share. When you look at the 3 messages, how beautifully the House of Justice in Nowruz message said, well, we have this crisis and this is not the time to talk about the details of the plan. And they gave us assurance. They encouraged us to be a source of hope and optimism among the population and go out and help everyone. In the Rizwan message, they analyzed what happened between Nowruz and Rizwan and said how well you are doing keep going with your engagement in society. And in this one, they said, all right, we have talked about these aspects of the pandemic, but nevertheless, we also need to discuss about the details of the plan as how we should adapt to it. And this is why it's addressed to the national assemblies, because it has a bit of business and decision makings to be made as well. So see how organized. The House of Justice, in one of the paragraphs I forgot to mention to you, they said the Friends need clear guidance. You know, friends, I think this is very, very important. In spite of reading all this, I think every local assembly should now tell the members in that local assembly, what is it that you have to do? For how long are you going to adopt these methodologies? And what does it mean, given the circumstances of that particular cluster? Clear guidance to the Friends is very important. But the House of Justice is telling us this week after themselves giving such clear guidance to the Baha'i world. So the combination of these three messages has had the impact of not only energizing us, but also making us to be very clear on what's happening in the world and what we have to do as Baha'is. My apologies for the length of my explanation, my sharing of thoughts with you. Jeff, I'm really done.
Thank you, Dr. Javaheri. That was wonderful. It was really a wonderful walk through that letter, the May 9th letter. There were so many gems, and I'm glad we were able to record the talk, and I think we'll be able to send out the talk one way or another. I'm not quite sure how we're going to do that, but as this is a local initiative of the Northern Ontario Baha'is, I'd like to respectfully ask the friends who are not part of Northern Ontario if we can have this space for us to discuss some of the practical plans around how we can start to put this into action in Northern Ontario. Does that make sense to everyone?
Before we go that, Jeff, if you don't mind, it will be fine. I don't have a problem of sharing this with others, but at least if you look at it, or if you send me a link, somebody to listen to it and say, what did I say? Does it make sense?
For sure. And we'd love to have you participate and help us with this discussion, Dr. Javaheri, of course.
Okay, all right. I just have seen Farzan and Nicole. I just want to say hello to them.
Hi guys, how are you?
Thank you so much for joining us. It's so lovely to see you.
Thank you.
We missed you so much.
Yes, we were supposed to have gone to Thunder Bay. We missed all that.
Oh.
Yes.
There's friends from Thunder Bay here, though, I think.
Yes, I heard that. That's wonderful.
So, Jeff, for Jeff, just a suggestion. I don't know, like I was on one of the council things, and they found that there's on the participant, there's a little hand thing that people can put up their hand and then you can kind of run people through it. So that way there's some kind of organization to when people want to talk or whatever they want to see. That's one of the ways they did it anyways, is the little hand thing. And they also offered people could put chat there too, and then they could send it in chat or put their hand up, depending on which way they wanted to go, and then you just go through the chats and through the hands, and that's just a suggestion.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Yeah, I'll try to take a look, and if people have questions, they can, like Chris mentioned, put them in the chat, or if somebody wants to speak, put up their hand. But I think I would put the question now, after we've heard Dr. Javaheri go through the letter. So what does this mean? What is the message, and how do we relate it to our local context in the clusters of Northern Ontario? How do we move forward with moving our clusters towards the goals of the 5-year plan, which is to move the 4 or 5 clusters in the north forward to the second milestone? How do we get from where we are to there?
Are you asking me, Jeff, or asking the participants?
I'm asking anybody who wants to contribute.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's
But certainly, Dr. Javaheri, what are your thoughts? Like, how do we, like you said, applying it to our local context? How do we then take the letter that's come to the international Baha'i community and apply it to Northern Ontario?
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, when we were with the group here discussing the Rezvan message, I had extracted, if I remember correctly, between Nowruz and Rezvan message, there are 5 or 6 lines of action that the House of Justice says you should be doing this. And I think that it begins by saying, attend to the needy, give priority to the one who is more vulnerable, and so on and so on. So the needs, the healthy, extend a hand of help and support to efforts being made to meet the needs of health of the community, something like this, right? Have these lines of actions in front of you in the community, because it then says, also, don't forget that people need to be cheered up, to have hope, to have good conversations. And so people need they respond to prayers a lot more. So it's an opportunity to increase the number of devotional meetings. And of course, every community, the advantage of this is that you have to then see who are your manpowers and how much can they do. And given the urgency of the matter, how many of the friends in each cluster can actually modify their way of life, even if it is temporarily, in such a way that they can do more. So, yeah, based on the essence of these 3 messages, I think that, but then, you know, the area teaching committee in each cluster and the local spiritual assembly should assist the friends. They need clear guidance of what to do. That's the essential. The House of Justice says that your consultation must be constant. So, for instance, to me, is it now enough to, like before, we send our commentaries and suggestions to the local assemblies every 90 days, or it's too late? Maybe the local assembly should consider facilitating a way where I can share my suggestions anytime. You see, so what we have been doing needs to be reviewed, and a new approach be adopted. As a result, we become more responsive to the needs of the community, of the society.
So I've got a question that came from Louisa. Any tips on how to regain lost momentum? Any tips on how a community can regain momentum that was gained and then perhaps has been lost somewhat through the pandemic?
Maybe we could share the specific example.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. You want to go ahead?
Well, does Louisa want to go ahead?
I was wondering if perhaps our pioneers could tell a little bit about where we were just before the pandemic struck and how we can bring it back with movement. We can Zoom and we can do those things, but Is there a way to bring the movement back, the upward movement? I don't know if Kalila or Chandon want to explain sort of where we were.
The junior youth group in the Sioux, yeah, when the March break came and we went home to Sudbury, the numbers were building and we were engaging like more youth and I think gaining a lot of momentum. But then I think we had a lot of trouble like contacting them and like yeah, trying to get their contact information.
And language is a barrier.
Yeah, language is a big barrier, and yeah, definitely a lot of momentum has been lost. And it'd be really helpful to know how to regain that, or yeah, especially in this situation.
I mean, there is also provision in these messages that there might be activities and plans that could not be attended to right away. And they even talk about having to attend to it during the 1-year plan. In other words, the possibility does exist that some, unfortunately, you may not be able to do much about it. I'm not suggesting that this is particularly one of them. It sounds like one of them. But Kalila, I was also, yeah, that one. Okay, the two of you, I was dying to see you. So that I'm so happy because I have been talking about you in Australia and New Zealand. And so if you ever hear about, I didn't give your names, but I did talk about the spirit of your pioneering spirit. So my question is there no one in that area that you could communicate with and empower them and encourage them to be you? In other words, say, while I cannot come, you do my job. And I'll back you up from here. Do you have anyone that you could imagine they would do?
Well, there is like a youth in the neighborhood that has like the contact information of a lot of the junior youth, but she is supposed to move away. I don't know, Kalila, do you think?
Who is that?
Noor.
No, she's not moving away.
She's not moving away.
No, she's not moving.
What? Okay.
No, I mean, like, this is
She was supposed to get married, but it's postponed or cancelled.
the last time we talked to her. It is not during the virus, long time ago. When we went to the home for home visit, she said that I just asked her, jokingly, said, okay, what's going on with the engagement? She said, what engagement? Is all done. I said, you mean you are not moving? She said, no. So I don't know if it has changed since 6 months ago, but this is what she said. She said, I don't want to leave my parents. So good to know.
Yeah.
So how many were in your nucleus, if you like? How many people you were studying? How many people you were working with?
Well, really the entire Baha'i community in the Sioux, we worked really closely with them. They were very helpful. They came to all the junior youth gatherings. They were there to help supervise. So it was really a community effort in that nucleus. So
and the institution
and the institutions, some auxiliary board members helped out too. And we were able to engage a few youth from the neighborhood who are really key in translating with the families. So yeah.
So how many, in terms of, either age or social circumstances, how many people do you have there who would possibly have the potential to be a pioneer or be be you, as I said. Do what you were doing. In other words, I'm trying to say if there are 5, 6, 10 of them, of all background, but people who are ready to spend as much time as you were, for instance, spending, have with them long hours of online consultation and prayers, and just throw the challenge to them that this has happened. Use relevant parts of the messages to inspire them, and say, this is it. It's a challenge. We can't come, but that may be for good reasons, because it's crisis and victories. And the victories is if you are right. See what they say. In other words, because it looks impossible, I'm sure you're not concluding that it is impossible. I don't know. Honestly, I don't.
Because the sort of the parameters of the situation are different, but they also change with the current pandemic, because the population they were engaging with was largely Syrian refugees who had very limited English. So it was a lot of body language and sitting and talking together, being in face to face. And that changes now when you have to engage by Zoom, because they don't really speak much English. It's much more difficult then to engage them, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it also opens up the pool of resources who could possibly help, right? Because you were limited by the people who could possibly speak. Is Arabic that they spoke?
Arabic.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or it may be, the answer may be that you are back to Sudbury. So be a pioneer in Sudbury in that spirit. And by next year, you would have produced, you would have helped develop so many others that, some next year people can go again back to Thunder Bay and other places. In other words, yes, at the same time, also we cannot be, we just have to see what can be done.
Khalil, if we can't do anything here, so you let us know. We have sort of contact with Noor's family.
Occasionally, yeah.
Occasionally we call, and sometimes they call back.
If I could say something, in Thunder Bay, we have a couple of different families that are Arabic speaking, and some that have actually got firsthand experience working with refugees, with Syrian refugees. So maybe we can have some consultation. If familiar, we've done a little bit with one of the friends from here that came for a short time, Roya, who you know. But I think that if we could consult together, we might be able to release some resources or figure out some way to provide some support.
Here we go. One more possibility.
And one thing I'd like to add to this and to the message, connecting this message to this, like in chapter 2, it says, to have brought hundreds of thousands of individuals into the embrace of the community activities in such a short period is an advance in capacity that has no parallel in any previous plan. This concept that we've got so much to do, but we just have we really have to understand that whether you're a Baha'i for 50 years or 5 minutes, the divine assistance is still there. And we kind of, like this kind of shows, like we have to look for those people that we can engage. I remember Nur, she's just an amazing, this girl is like incredible. Like she's really just enthusiastic. You have to just grab these people and keep them going. And another thing about this whole institute process, at the beginning, when I was at the World Center, when we were there, one of the things that the House of Justice was talking about, I heard from a couple of House members and some councillors that they were concerned about at the World Center, is they were saying, we want the World Center to grow, but we want to keep the warmth. And when I heard the first thing about the neighborhood, that's the key to having growth but keeping warmth. Every individual Baha'i, it's too big to think, what can I do in the cluster? But if we see ourselves and see these neighborhoods, of whatever neighborhood we live in, that's our primary responsibility, to see what's there, to see and to start see those things. And as we see those little things, they kind of give us the assemblies and institutions greater understanding of what really we have to do. Because I think the whole institute process is to empower the individual. And when there's lots of little individual things going on, sometimes it might be more powerful than one big, like the core activities have to be supported, but we as individuals have to find those little teeny things that can get the neighbor, we can do in our neighborhood. And you see this, if you want to see the power of this, you see it in just in the Zoom and the whole Baha'i, in the world in general. So many people are coming up with so many interesting ways to keep their neighborhood, encouraged in that. And we have to be able to kind of find ways, and that we can also introduce those core basic spiritual principles that not only create that unity, but elevate that the environment in your own neighborhood. And I think that this becomes a challenge to us as Baha'is. Like before, we could go say, okay, if there's no people not good in my neighborhood, I'll go to another one. But now you have to really kind of try and work with the people that are around you in your neighborhood and find ways to elevate that. And I think, anyways, that's my contribution.
Yeah. I'd like to say something, if I can, too, at this time about that. The Baha'i faith is a faith of history of crisis and victory, and we thrive on crisis, and we survive crisis, and we come out of crisis elevated to new levels of service. And our history is full of these incidents, and this is one of them. And I can't help thinking that all that crisis in the history of the faith has prepared us for this moment in time. And when I think of what's happening now, and I don't think of it in terms of loss opportunity, or loss of incentive, or loss of initiatives. I think of it in terms of opportunities. And there are so many opportunities out there. And in terms of your young friends in the Sioux, I don't think they're going anywhere. Like they are there. The Sioux is their home, and you have planted a seed. And sometimes when you can't do anything else, you send love and you send prayers. And I like this idea of what Dr. Javaheri said, and it reminds me of a song. If you can't be with the one you love, love the one you're with. And if you take this opportunity now, where you are now, and you do what you can, and you are doing what you can, and you have continued momentum here, it's just going to spread. It's just going to spread. And Baha'u'llah says it's going to happen. It's going to happen. And we can see it. More and more people are joining our dialogue. They're communicating with us more. They get it. So I wouldn't despair. I would never despair. This is all going to come out even better when this is over. So, our young people here, they're such an inspiration to us all. And if you can get me reading the Dawn Breakers, then really you can do anything, and you are doing anything. You will move the world, and you will continue to do so. So I wouldn't despair. Just send them your love and send them your thoughts, and that's pretty powerful too. That's pretty powerful too at this time.
And I'm sure that those young Syrians can't wait to hear your voice again, even if it's in English.
Yeah.
No, what Helen says is really beautiful, because this crisis and victories must realize that's, as she says, we thrive on it. In a tablet, just though to remind us, there is a tablet from Abdul Baha that he talks about crises and victories. And almost what she says, Abdul Baha says, therefore, after explaining the process of crisis and victories, that every crisis are actually is an opportunity for the faith, he says, therefore, the friends of God must not rest one moment, day and night. So there is also a connection with that. There is opportunity in crisis, but it requires hard work. And so rather than worrying about it, look at the crisis as opportunities, but be ready to really work harder.
Yes, there's no getting around the hard work, right? Hard work. There's no magic solution.
No, that's correct. You know, there's a prayer of Abdul Baha in Arabic, but I don't know if it's translated in English, but it's one of my favorite prayers because he asked God to strengthen our back to serve thee, give power to our tongue to spread your word and all that. He says 3 or 4 of these requests from God, and then he says, Hatta nahdi al-umam, until. So because you say, when you read that, you wonder, so for how long you're going to do it? He answers that. He says, until the day when we have summoned all humanity to the shore of the ocean of thy words. So in other words, for a long time to come, there is no there's no escape from hard work. I think Sana knows the prayer.
Are there any other comments or questions from some of the Northern Baha'is?
Can I say something?
Sure, go ahead. Yes.
Alaba, dear friends, Alaba, Dr. Javaheri. I am from Firaydoun, Ontario.
Okay.
You talk about the difficulty of Arabic speaking and Arabic, translation. We have in Firaydoun, we have 3-4 people. They are fluent in Arabic. Probably, if they can communicate with them or with us, maybe we can help them by Zoom to connect the youngsters to each other. Because my sons, they are here, my daughter-in-law, they are here, so they are young too. They can communicate together, and then probably they can help. I think, I don't know, probably.
Yeah, that would be wonderful.
It's a great suggestion.
Yeah, that is the one I was thinking that maybe they can do it.
We've had an offer already in a private message.
Okay.
That's great, though. It's amazing to see the potential when the crisis hits, how we can turn it and use for all of the friends who are not from Northern Ontario, one of the main factors that we struggle with is the feelings of isolation and the very widespread small pockets of Baha'is across a huge geographical area. Suddenly we find that the whole world is isolated, just as we are, but by technology we're also connected suddenly, and it's a demonstration of the unity of oneness. And yeah, it's great to see that there's a couple of offers already of people who can help with this.
Jeff, in the next series of plans, hopefully, every isolated believer in North Ontario will be told to have a intensive program of growth where they are. So they will come out of isolation.
Look forward to it.
I was thinking that like during this time of this pandemic, we just started some Zoom consultations with Baha'is from around Northern Ontario, kind of two, really. I think this is kind of a third, but I think that that this particular consultation with the benefit of Dr. Javaheri is really helping to focus us so that we can use those that space to really look at practical needs, like what needs to be done, and how we can respond to these needs and work together, so that really we're having now, I think, before us an opportunity to really come together as a region in a way that we never, to reach a higher level of unity and collaboration. So I think that I can see that we've already talked about a few specific things. I think at the last call, I think it was the last time, we talked about what were the goals for the North, which I hadn't really been aware of what the goals were. And that was, and we have, for example, somebody from Port Francis here, Sherry DeGagne. And so realizing that, we would like to get some core activities going in some of these places. So anyways, I think that this has really been a wonderful benefit for us to become more focused and to carry on and to have some really good changes, some good growth.
Good. Mm-hmm. Who knows, maybe a consultation as whether you need to look into more efficient use of technology in the North. Maybe even when the crisis go away, North will benefit from this technology. And so does every Baha'i have access to it? Does anyone needs to be trained to use of it? In other words, there are many different aspects, one of which is this technology. The assemblies should find out that if there is a possibility that with the technology we will have a bigger reach, maybe that's the way we should go, including the non-Baha'is. So, yeah, there are a lot of examination that needs to be done.